I want to start with a headache. Not a literal one, but, philosophical one.
Okay.
It's that age-old problem that hits you when you first start, I don't know, taking philosophy seriously, or maybe just staring at the ceiling at 3 in the morning.
I know the one.
It's that tension between the architecture of the universe, destiny, divine will, whatever you want to call it, and the feeling that I am the one deciding to speak into this microphone right now.
The classic agency versus determinism debate. Yeah, that's the engine behind centuries of theology.
Right. And usually we retreat into one of two corners. Corner one is, it's all written, we're just acting out a script, so nothing I do really matters.
And corner two.
Corner two, it's all me. I am the captain of my soul, and destiny is just the story we tell ourselves. But today we're looking at a source that seems to, it seems to reject both of those.
We are. We're looking at a single, incredibly dense sentence from the Quran. Sura Yunus, chapter 10, verse 100.
A single sentence.
And what makes this text so fascinating and, frankly, so difficult is that it puts those two contradictions into a pressure cooker and just forces them to coexist.
It's a logic puzzle.
Yeah.
I've read the translation you sent over like 10 times, and my first reaction was just frustration. It feels like the first half of the sentence locks the door and the second half yells at you for not walking through it.
That is a very, very perceptive reading.
Yeah.
That frustration is actually part of the design.
You think so?
I do. The text creates a deliberate cognitive dissonance. Our job today is to see if we can resolve it without, cheating, without just saying it's a mystery.
Okay, let's get into the text then. This is verse 100 of Sura Yunus. I'll read the first part because this is where all the trouble starts.
Go for it.
No soul can believe except by the will of God.
Except by the will of God.
Let's just stop right there. I mean, if we take that literally as a standalone statement, it just sounds fatalistic.
It does.
It sounds like a closed loop. If I am a soul and I want to believe, this text seems to be saying, well, check your ticket. If you don't have the stamp of approval from the divine will, you're not getting in.
It creates a strict hierarchy. Grammatically, it's an exclusionary statement. It establishes jurisdiction. It's saying that the capacity for belief isn't generated internally by the human ego.
It's granted.
It is granted externally by the divine structure.
But isn't that demoralizing? I mean, let's play devil's advocate here. If I'm a skeptic or someone struggling with faith and I read, no soul can believe except by God's will.
Yeah.
My response is going to be, I guess God didn't will it for me. I'm off the hook.
And you're touching on the danger of reading this clause in isolation. It's that gatekeeper interpretation. If belief is solely a divine grant, then lack of belief is a divine rejection.
Exactly. It shifts the burden entirely off the human.
Completely. And onto the architect. It makes the human passive. We become puppets just waiting for our strings to be pulled.
And if the strings aren't pulled, you can't blame the puppet for lying on the floor.
That is the logical trap of absolute determinism. If you stop reading at the comma, you're left with a universe where human effort is theoretically meaningless.
Well, you're saying there's a comma?
There's a big one. The tenth doesn't end. It doesn't say, God chooses who believes, the end. It introduces a condition, or maybe a counterweight, that completely reframes what God's will actually looks like.
This is the pivot. And I have to say, the second half of this verse is surprising. I was expecting the requirement to be something pious.
Like what?
I expected no one believes except by God's will, so pray harder, or so submit fully.
Or so humble yourself, one of the classics.
But it doesn't say any of that. Read the second half for us.
The text continues, and he will place the filth of doubt upon those who do not use their reason.
Those who do not use their reason. That is a massive left turn.
Isn't it?
We went from this metaphysical top-down decree to a very specific cognitive requirement.
It creates a dependency. And notice the operational word here. In the Arabic, the root is aql. It means intellect, reason, the capacity to bind and understand concepts.
So it's about thinking.
Explicitly, the text is stating that the consequence of not engaging the intellect is this state of filth.
But wait, I want to push back on how these two fit together. We just established that the first half says it's all up to God. The second half says if you don't think, you get filth. Are we saying that God's will is dependent on me thinking? That feels like it contradicts the whole absolute power vibe of the first part.
That is the core paradox. How do you have absolute divine will and absolute human responsibility to reason? To understand this, I think we have to stop thinking of God's will as like a guy in the sky picking teams.
Okay.
We need a better analogy.
I'm listening.
Think of God's will here not as some whimsical choice, but as The laws of
The
physics.
laws of physics.
The laws of aerodynamics exist. They are absolute. You cannot fly unless the laws of aerodynamics allow it. That is the will of the universe, so to speak.
Okay, so the will is the framework. It's the unlocked door, or, in your analogy, the potential for flight.
Exactly. The atmosphere permits flight. That is the will. But does the atmosphere build the plane?
Ooh, we build the plane.
And does the atmosphere pilot the plane?
No.
Reason is the engineering. Reason is the pilot. The text is suggesting that belief is the act of flying. You cannot fly except by the permission of the laws of physics. That's God's will. But those laws will essentially crush you, or at least leave you grounded, if you do not apply the mechanism of aerodynamics.
Which is reason.
Which is reason.
That helps. That actually helps a lot. So the first clause isn't saying God picks favorites. It's saying God established the system.
Precisely. It's establishing the rules of engagement. The will is the possibility space. And reason is the navigation tool you're given to move through that space.
But let's look at that specific tool at reason, because reason is such a loaded word today.
How so?
Well, in a modern context, we often pit reason against faith. We say, I'm a person of reason, so I don't believe in fairy tales.
Right. But this text is claiming that reason is the prerequisite for belief.
It completely flips that modern narrative, and the implication here is fascinating. It suggests that if you are not believing, it might not be because you are too logical.
But because you aren't using your reason enough.
Exactly.
That's a bold claim. It suggests that skepticism, or at least the kind of skepticism that leads to a dead end, is actually a failure of intellect.
Or a stagnation of intellect. And look at the consequence mentioned. This brings us to that visceral word you pointed out earlier. The text says God will place filth upon those who do not use their reason.
Rees. It's translated as filth, with doubt in brackets. But filth is so physical. It makes me think of dirt, sewage, contamination. Why use such a gross word for a mental state?
Because it's describing a state of dysfunction and pollution. In the classical context, rees can mean something abominable, something dirty, or even something that causes sickness.
So it's not just a mistake. Not at all. By applying this word to a mind that doesn't reason, the text is saying that intellectual laziness isn't just an error. It's a form of rot.
That is heavy. It's not just, oh, you didn't think about it, no big deal. It's, if you don't run the engine, the oil turns to sludge.
That's a great image. Think about a stagnant pond. Water is meant to flow. If it stops flowing, what happens?
It gets murky.
It becomes murky, toxic. Things start to grow in it that shouldn't be there. The text is framing the human intellect as something that must be in motion. Using reason is an active verb.
So the filth is what happens when you let your mind just sit still.
That's the idea. The filth of confusion, of baseless suspicion, of anxiety. The text suggests that these are the byproducts of a mind that has abdicated this responsibility to think.
I want to drill down on using reason, though. Does this mean any kind of reasoning? Because you can reason your way into some pretty terrible ideas.
Of course.
You can rationalize crimes. You can intellectualize cruelty. Is the text just saying, be smart?
And that is the critical distinction. The Quranic concept of aql isn't just IQ or computational power. It's not about just being clever. It's the faculty of binding information together to reach the truth.
It implies a moral trajectory.
So it's directed thinking. It's not just mental gymnastics.
Right. It's the honest, rigorous search for reality. And the argument the source makes is that if you genuinely use that tool, if you really follow the logic of the universe to its end, it aligns you with the will of God. It leads to belief.
And if you don't,
then you get the rees. You get the chaos. You get a worldview that doesn't hold together, that feels unclean because it's full of contradictions and blind spots.
This puts a tremendous amount of responsibility back on the individual. We started by worrying that the first half of the verse took away all our agency. But the second half seems to say, your agency is the only thing standing between you and spiritual filth.
It completely removes the excuse of ignorance. It removes the excuse of, I was just following orders, or I just followed my parents' religion.
Or I'm just waiting for a sign. Exactly. I'm waiting for God to will it. The text effectively says, stop waiting. Start thinking. The act of thinking is the engagement with the will.
It's like that old saying, God helps those who help themselves. But this is so much more specific. It's God guides those who use their brains.
And conversely, God allows pollution to cover those who shut their brains off.
Let's talk about the modern application of this, because we live in an era where not using reason is almost the default setting.
That's for sure.
We have algorithms that think for us. We have echo chambers. We consume headlines without ever reading the articles.
We are swimming in a sea of potential rates.
Right. If we apply this text to social media, for example, the mindless scrolling, the emotional reactivity, the accepting of facts just because they fit our bias, under this definition, that is a state of spiritual filth.
I would argue that is exactly what the text is warning against. When you outsource your reason to a crowd or to an algorithm or to some charismatic leader, you are deactivating the very tool that is meant to protect your soul. You are inviting that contamination in.
It redefines sin in a way. We usually think of sin as bad actions, lying, stealing, but this frames intellectual negligence as a major transgression.
It frames it as the root of the problem. Why do people commit atrocities? Often because they have suspended their reason. They have allowed themselves to be filled with the filth of blind hatred or blind obedience.
So critical thinking isn't just a secular skill you use for your job, it's a spiritual safeguard.
It's a spiritual duty. This completely dismantles the idea that faith requires checking your brain at the door.
Right.
This source argues that if you check your brain at the door, you aren't walking into a sanctuary, you're walking into a sewer.
That is a stark image. But I want to go back to the God's will part one more time. Does this synthesis, this idea of the plane and the atmosphere, does it fully resolve the tension for you? Or is there still a bit of mystery there?
I think if we're honest, there's always a remaining tension. We are finite beings trying to understand an infinite framework. We can't fully grasp the will, but the text gives us a pragmatic solution. We don't need to understand the full architecture of the will to know what our job is.
Our job is to fly the plane.
Our job is to fly the plane. We leave the meteorology to God, but we have to keep our hands on the controls.
It's empowering, but it's also exhausting. It means there is no autopilot in the life of a believer.
There is no autopilot, and I think that's the point. The state of belief described here is dynamic. It's not a trophy you win once and put on a shelf. Those who do not use their reason, it implies a continuous action. The moment you stop using reason, the filth starts to come back.
It's like cleaning a house. You don't clean it once and say, well, that's done forever.
Right.
Dust accumulates, entropy happens, reaccumulates.
And reason is the broom. It's the constant maintenance of the soul's clarity.
I really like that. It moves faith away from being a status and turns it into a practice, a cognitive practice.
It brings us right back to the start.
Yeah.
Is belief something that happens to you or something you figure out?
And the answer from Sura Yunus seems to be. It is something that is allowed to happen to you, provided you are doing the work of figuring it out.
Destiny provides the playground. Intellect is how you play the game. You cannot control the playground, but you are absolutely responsible for how you play.
Which is a terrifyingly liberating thought. It means I can't blame the universe for my own confusion.
No. But it also means you aren't a victim of the universe. You are equipped. You have the tool, the ACL. The only question is, are you using it?
So for the listener who is maybe commuting right now or doing dishes,
Right.
What's the takeaway? If they feel that filth, that doubt, that anxiety, that mental fog, what's the prescription here?
The prescription is to engage. Don't retreat into blind faith and don't retreat into cynical apathy. Those are both forms of not using reason. The prescription is to ask the hard question. Read the difficult book. Challenge your own assumptions.
Treat your brain as the vehicle that gets you closer to the divine.
Exactly. Don't be afraid that thinking will lead you away from truth. This text promises that honest thinking is the only way to arrive at it.
It's a call to intellectual arms.
It is.
I think we've successfully unpacked the logic, even if the mystery of the will is still a little bit above our pay grade.
As it should be.
But the mandate for us is clear. I want to leave everyone with a final thought, something to chew on. We often compartmentalize our lives, We have prayer time and we have thinking time.
The sacred and the secular.
Right. But if we follow the logic of this verse, if the filth of doubt is removed by using reason, and if using reason aligns us with God's will, then we have to ask a pretty provocative question.
What's that?
Is critical thinking actually a form of prayer? When you're solving a complex problem or deconstructing a lie or just trying to understand how the world works, are you actually engaging in an act of worship?
If it clears the filth, I would say absolutely.
As something to think about the next time you're wrestling with a tough idea, you might be doing the most spiritual thing possible. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Keep thinking.
We'll see you next time.